It's 1 p.m. in New York, 8 p.m. in the Middle East. Live from Jaffa, you're watching The Lineup. Tonight, the Israeli southern border heats up with the Israeli Defense Forces striking targets in the Gaza Strip after a rocket fired from there exploded in the southern Israeli city of Sderot this morning, following a red alert siren. It was a day of rocket and retaliation. An Islamic State-linked Salafi group claimed it carried out the rocket attack, which, according to police, crashed in an open area. Shai Ben-Ari reports.
It was a close call. A rocket fired from Gaza slammed into a residential street in the morning hours in Sderot, landing in the middle of this road. Luckily, no one was injured, though some damage was caused to surrounding vehicles and buildings. A number of people were treated for shock. Shrapnel from the rocket smashed into this window that we see here behind us and sprayed all these glass shards here on the ground. You can see them all around me here, as well as children's toys in this front yard of the home just near the impact site. Shula's house was also hit by shrapnel. She was at work when the rocket struck.
After I left, I got a call from my son saying, "Mom, come quick, the whole house is broken. The blinds, the doors, my son's car, everything is broken." I asked him, "Nothing happened to you?" Thank God nothing happened to him, except they took my husband in an ambulance. He was afraid. He was afraid and he also fell. I don't know, he got hit in the leg. I don't know what exactly happened. I haven't seen him yet.
Shula's son sleeps in this bed, which we found covered in broken glass. The child was at school at the time of the impact. Damage was also caused to Eti's home across the street. She told us of her anger that the Iron Dome missile defense system was not activated to intercept the rocket.
I would say that whether or not the Iron Dome was activated, it didn't fire. If it didn't fire, then the government has to do something. The time has come for them to do something. It's not possible to live with missiles falling at random. It's not possible. It's like you're choosing to spray your citizens with bullets. We can't live like that.
An Israeli response against Hamas targets in the northern Gaza Strip was already underway at midday. The last time a rocket landed in Sderot back in August, Israel retaliated with 50 separate airstrikes.
And we're now joined live via Skype by Gaza-based journalist Majd Al-Wahidi. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
So Israel holds Hamas accountable for all activity in the Strip. How is Hamas reacting to such activity within their jurisdiction?
Well, Hamas issued a statement just some hours ago saying that they are not interested in an escalation. But if Israel keeps bombing Gaza, they will retaliate and they will attack Gaza. They will attack Israel. And people now are busy with this Zaytuna flotilla. So today in Gaza, we had two major events. We kept hearing airstrikes since the morning. And also at like around 6 p.m., women who were waiting for other women to come to Gaza and join them in the Zaytuna flotilla, they are back to their homes now. Hamas analysts, I called Ibrahim al-Madhoun, who said that Hamas is not interested in an escalation, and this military escalation is political, just to cover up the crime of Israel for attacking the Zaytuna flotilla.
Majd, the flotilla is indeed going out this evening, but I do want to take you back to the rocket fired from Gaza into Israel and the retaliation. How do you explain the fact that Hamas cannot control these militant activities happening within the Strip when they are the sole controllers?
Hamas is the sole controller, you are right, and they didn't hold responsibility today for the rocket launch. No one from Hamas said we are responsible for this rocket. Usually who fire rockets into Israel, they describe them as Salafists or militants who are not from Hamas and who fight with Hamas and they want to take revenge from Hamas. They go to the border and they fire rockets into Israel in revenge of Hamas.
But do you think maybe Hamas turns a blind eye to these activities because Israel is a common enemy after all?
Yes, Hamas actually tries to, as they say, today they say the ceasefire, Israel is no longer respectful of the ceasefire and because they retaliated. So Hamas tries its best, as they say, to respect the ceasefire, and sometimes they arrest these people who fire rockets into Israel.
Maja Wahedi, thank you very much for joining us and weighing in on today's events. And as Maj mentioned, there is a Gaza-bound flotilla coming in with 13 activists, female activists on board. We're going to go now live to Ashdod, where our senior correspondent, defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari stands by. The flotilla was diverted to there. Shai, what can you tell us? Where do things stand?
The Oliva, as it's known, or Zaytuna in Arabic, was headed towards Gaza, but was intercepted by Israeli naval forces about 2.5 hours ago, and it is currently making its way to here, to the naval port of Ashdod, which you can see here behind me. It's still going to take a few hours before we actually expect this ship to enter the naval harbor here. We understand that the boarding itself was fairly uneventful, or at least quiet, and it was actually a female IDF Navy soldiers who boarded this ship, and that may have helped things go rather uneventfully. This also was more or less expected from what the activists, the female activists, of course. This boat has been sailing, you could say, under the hashtag of Women's Boat to Gaza. Female activists, human rights activists, including a female Nobel Prize laureate, Maureen McGuire, was on board. They all said they would not put up any sort of violent resistance to any IDF effort to board the ship, and that is apparently what has transpired. What is expected in the future, in a few hours, once this ship does come into port, the activists are expected to go with some sort of interrogation by the IDF or by the Shin Bet, and then they will at some stage fairly quickly, I imagine, be deported out of Israel back to their home countries.
Now, Shai, what do we know about the contents of the ship? We do know, of course, the ship will go through some examination and, as you mentioned, interrogation. But what do the activists claim they have on board?
Well, I believe the main objective of this particular flotilla was rather symbolic in an attempt to break the Israeli blockade on the Gaza Strip, which is a matter of Israeli policy, of course. Israeli policy has been for several years now, from about 2007. There's been a policy to not allow any sort of sea entry into the Gaza Strip. All goods going into Gaza must go over land through Israeli checkpoints, through Israeli security examinations, and that is also true in this case. They may be carrying light cargo, rather symbolic, you could say, intended for the Gaza Strip, but in the past, with the similar flotillas headed towards Gaza, Israel has allowed goods to enter so long as they cannot be used for terrorist purposes to eventually enter the Gaza Strip, but over land and after Israeli security examinations.
Thanks very much, Shai, for this. We'll, of course, continue to get updates as the flotilla approaches the Ashdod shore. And we're going to go live now to the Gaza border, where our correspondent Anna Ehrenheim stands by. Anna, a heated day in the Gaza border, and for residents, I guess this is not exactly a new reality. What kind of reactions are we hearing, and are you hearing any military ongoing operations overhead?
It's actually quite quiet. There is a fire burning in back of me near Beit Hanun, where Israeli airstrikes did hit earlier in the day. There were over 20 airstrikes that hit Gaza, actually, mostly in Gaza City and Khan Yunis, coming after the rocket struck Sderot. Now, the last rocket to strike Sderot from Gaza Strip was on August 20th, and after that rocket hit, there were about 50 airstrikes by the Israeli Air Force to hit Gaza. Right now, we are hearing that the Gaza border residents, especially in Sderot, are angry and are asking, why wasn't the Iron Dome deployed here right now? Why isn't it permanently deployed here? As it was earlier, the Iron Dome had been deployed after the August 20th strike, and it was taken away. Right now, it is quiet, but we do expect that there might be further airstrikes later in the night. Again, there were over 20 airstrikes right now, earlier in the day, but right now it's quite quiet.
Indeed, multiple airstrikes by the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli Air Force, of course. But looking at the people in Sderot, are they fearing some form of escalation after today?
I don't believe that they think there's going to be another war, for example, like there was two years ago, but they are always concerned that if there is one rocket, there might be more. Again, this rocket was launched by a Salafi jihadist group in the Gaza Strip, not by Hamas, but Israel does hold Hamas responsible for any rocket that comes out, even if it's from another group, a group that does not really get along with Hamas, but they will be held responsible. And it's likely that this group was trying to get the Israeli Air Force to hit Hamas in a way that they couldn't. So again, if that is the case, if this group really wants the Israeli Air Force to do their dirty work, then they might again launch rockets towards Israel just so that the Israeli Air Force would hit Hamas targets.
Indeed, Anna Ehrenheim, thank you very much for this update. Meanwhile, a delegation from the International Criminal Court based in The Hague is visiting Israel and the West Bank this week. According to the ICC chief prosecutor, the group is not aiming to gather evidence, but rather to, quote, promote better understanding about its work. Diplomatic correspondent Eli Hohenberg has the story.
Building bridges or opening a new front. A delegation from the International Criminal Court kicked off its 5-day visit in Israel and the Palestinian territories Wednesday in a bid to, quote, promote better understanding of its work after long years of tensions between Jerusalem and the World's War Crimes Court. According to the ICC announcement, the delegation will meet Israeli and Palestinian officials at the working levels rather than political entities in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Ramallah. The Gaza Strip is off the table this time around. The announcement stressed that there will be no evidence collection during the trip, despite an ongoing initial probe into alleged war crimes of both Israeli and Palestinians during the 2014 summer Gaza war.
Palestine remains one of the most important tests of the will and ability of the international community. It is a test that the world cannot afford to fail.
Israel has traditionally refused to cooperate with any ICC investigation, similarly to its stand regarding the United Nations Human Rights Council and other UN agencies. Israeli officials were also repeatedly criticizing the ICC, most notably after the Palestinians officially joined the criminal court back in April 2015. Last month, however, officials at the Prime Minister's office were quoted as saying that Jerusalem is weighing the possibility of allowing representatives to come to Israel and engage in a dialogue. What could have been the trigger for such a shift in policy? Mutual public relations. First, allowing access to ICC prosecutors is a clear signal of good faith on behalf of Israel. While such a move might have limited, if any, impact on a potential report or probe, the value of cooperation on its own could help Israel to elevate its international image. Second, by allowing access to one, you are undermining the other, in this case, UN agencies. By cooperating, Jerusalem helps the ICC to maintain its superiority over other world bodies. Such bodies Israel finds to be more hostile. It's unclear whether this somewhat unprecedented cooperation exceeds the borders of strategic interests.
And from the ICC, we move to the United Nations, which has all its eyes on its next Secretary General, with former Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Guterres the seeming frontrunner and favorite, following a sixth straw poll by the Security Council. A formal vote is due on Thursday, that's tomorrow, for the final announcement. And we're joined now in studio by our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Owen Alterman. Thanks for being here. Owen, what do we know about this guy? What do we know about the former Prime Minister of Portugal?
Well, as you said, first of all, former Prime Minister of Portugal. And he'd served for the last 10 years as the head of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. So his heart is really connected to this issue of migrants, which, of course, is one of the great challenges for global governance of our time, given the situation in Syria and the unprecedented crush of migrants, the largest since the end of the Second World War. So he comes to the post with a lot of experience on that issue. We also know that he's not Eastern European and he's not a woman. But then those are the two groups that were expected to supply the next Secretary General, Eastern Europe never having supplied a Secretary General, and no Secretary General in the 70-plus years of the United Nations ever having been female.
So what does it take actually to be eligible? And take us a bit through the procedure of how the voting works.
Well, it's a murky procedure, and there was a big campaign this go around to have more openness and transparency. There were actually public hearings in the General Assembly. There was a public debate between the declared candidates. But still, at the end of the day, these were votes taken in the Security Council where they had what are called straw polls, where they had essentially up or down votes informally on each of the candidates. And Guterres was at the point where he had 13 yes votes essentially and 2 abstains, which was good enough for him to emerge as the candidate, who will go to a formal vote, as you said, tomorrow, and then to the General Assembly. So a murky, complex process ending with Antonio Guterres, to some degree, as a surprise choice.
A surprise choice. And are people vowing that he might have more influence than Ban Ki-moon? Are there many hopes high at the UN at this time?
Well, he is viewed as an activist, again, as an activist on the migrant crisis, and maybe a more articulate voice. Ban Ki-moon was often criticized for being gray or even dull and not really up to the challenges of articulating positions on these major global governance issues like migration and climate change and non-proliferation. So I think people will be expecting more of that from Guterres, again, Michal, especially on this issue of the migrant crisis.
And now a formal announcement is expected tomorrow, if I understand, or could there still be a surprise and some other candidate could emerge?
Well, you never know if the Russians have something up their sleeve at the last minute to try to veto the choice, but it doesn't look like it. It was the Russian ambassador as the president of the Security Council to make the announcement. But after the vote at the Security Council, it does go before the General Assembly. By all accounts, though, Antonio Guterres, next Secretary General of the United Nations.
All right, and we welcome him. Thank you very much, Owen Alterman, for this update. It's 1 p.m. in New York, 8 p.m. in the Middle East. Live from Jaffa, you're watching The Lineup. Tonight, the Israeli southern border heats up with the Israeli Defense Forces striking targets in the Gaza Strip after a rocket fired from there exploded in the southern Israeli city of Sderot this morning, following a red alert siren. It was a day of rocket and retaliation. An Islamic State-linked Salafi group claimed it carried out the rocket attack, which, according to police, crashed in an open area. Shai Ben-Ari reports.
It was a close call. A rocket fired from Gaza slammed into a residential street in the morning hours in Sderot, landing in the middle of this road. Luckily, no one was injured, though some damage was caused to surrounding vehicles and buildings. A number of people were treated for shock. Shrapnel from the rocket smashed into this window that we see here behind us and sprayed all these glass shards here on the ground. You can see them all around me here, as well as children's toys in this front yard of the home just near the impact site. Shula's house was also hit by shrapnel. She was at work when the rocket struck.
After I left, I got a call from my son saying, "Mom, come quick. The whole house is broken. The blinds, the doors, my son's car, everything is broken." I asked him, "Nothing happened to you?" Thank God nothing happened to him, except they took my husband in an ambulance. He was afraid. He was afraid and he also fell. I don't know, he got hit in the leg. I don't know what exactly happened. I haven't seen him yet.
Shula's son sleeps in this bed, which we found covered in broken glass. The child was at school at the time of the impact. Damage was also caused to Eti's home across the street. She told us of her anger that the Iron Dome missile defense system was not activated to intercept the rocket.